His wife couldn't fit the seatbelt on the plane. But what happened next shocked everyone. The flight attendant paused, her eyes flicking from the metal clasp in her hand to the woman seated in 14A. An uncomfortable silence wrapped around the cabin as passengers exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others avoiding eye contact altogether. His wife sat motionless, her cheeks flushed with shame, as she fumbled with the seatbelt that simply wouldn't click. He reached for her hand, trying to steady her trembling fingers, but the damage had already begun to settle deep within her spirit. No one had to say a word. The judgment was already thick in the air. It wasn't just about a seatbelt. It was about dignity. About years of silent suffering, masked by smiles at family gatherings, and laughter that never quite reached her eyes. The man beside her, her husband, could see it. He'd seen it in the dressing rooms where she fought back tears. He'd seen it when she'd delete photos of herself moments after taking them. And now, the very thing that was supposed to be an exciting journey, a long-awaited vacation, was turning into a moment neither of them would forget for reasons they never anticipated. A second seatbelt extender was brought over. Whispers now rippled through the rows. Still, she refused to look up, her eyes locked on her lap, as if hoping the world would simply disappear. But then, something happened. Something no one could have predicted. The plane had just begun to taxi when his gaze met hers, and they didn't need words to understand the weight of what just transpired. She held his hand tighter than usual, her palm damp with anxiety. Her breathing was shallow, but she managed to smile. Not the cheerful, surface-level kind, but the kind that comes from being seen, from being loved even when the world turns cold. As the engines roared and the plane lifted, she looked out the window, hiding the tears that streamed quietly. No one else saw Thema, but he did. He knew every crack in her armor, every silent cry behind brave expressions. She wasn't broken, just tired of pretending. Hours later, when the seatbelt sign turned off and flight attendants began their rounds, a woman seated across the aisle leaned in. She looked to be in her 60s, with soft eyes and silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She touched the wife's arm gently, surprising her. "I used to dread flying too," she said quietly, her voice barely above the hum of the engines. "But not for the turbulence." She smiled kindly and gave her a reassuring nod. "You're not alone, sweetheart." It was just a moment, a passing remark, but it meant everything. Because for once, someone saw her pain and didn't look away. That night in the hotel, they didn't go out like they'd planned. Instead, they sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, sipping lukewarm coffee and talking about everything they'd never dared to before. He listened to her, really listened to her as she opened up about the years of self-doubt, the hateful inner voice that followed her everywhere, and the countless times she felt invisible. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't tell her to be positive. He simply held her hand and told her he was prouder, so deeply prouder to be her husband. Not despite everything, but because of everything. The next morning, she stood before the mirror in their hotel room, not to critique her body, but to really see herself. The stretch marks, the curves, the tired eyes, they told a story. Not one of failure, but of endurance, survival, and love. At breakfast, something was different. She smiled at the waiter, laughed without covering her mouth, and didn't tug at her sleeves every few minutes. He noticed, of course. He always did. Later that afternoon, as they walked along the shore, children ran by, couples lounged on sun-warmed towels, and the ocean shimmered like glass. She took off her sandals, letting the sand sink between her toes. When he raised his camera to take a picture, she didn't flinch or turn away. She simply smiled unapologetically. That photo now sits framed on their living room shelf. Visitors often compliment it without knowing the story behind it. They don't see the silent battles or the pain etched between the lines of that one moment. But he sees it. And more importantly, she sees it too. Their vacation continued with small victories: swimming without cover-ups, dancing at the beach party, even trying on clothes at a street market. Nothing earth-shattering. Just moments that mattered deeply to the two of them. On the final day, while packing their bags, she pulled out a small notebook she'd kept hidden in the lining of her suitcase. "I used to write letters to myself," she confessed. Mostly the kind I needed to hear but never did. She handed it to him, page after page, filled with raw, aching truths. Ugly, worthless, not enough for words that had haunted her for decades. But at the very end, on the last page, a new sentence glowed in bold handwriting. I am still here. And I'm learning to love that. He wrapped her in his arms and whispered the only thing he could. So am I. As they boarded the return flight, she clicked the seatbelt into place with ease. But even if she hadn't, it wouldn't have mattered, because something far greater had changed. Not her size, not the world, but the way she saw herself and the strength she'd rediscovered in the most unexpected way. And that shocked every in the broken